Hi, YouTube. It's me, Serial Ether. I say that every time I start a video. Anyway, I'm here with a book that's not a movie for once. It's just a book, and it is The Har by David Sodergren. I might be pronouncing that wrong. David Sodergren. It's it it's here. If you're curious, it's gonna be right there. So, just as a warning, this is not a spoiler-free review. It's me reviewing this book without censorship because it's a really short book. It's 200 pages. Plus, I start like talking about what the actual book is about versus just just telling you guys my feelings. Otherwise, this would be a really short video, which is it was good. It was a good book. It's not without its faults. I think it's a good book though. So I'll go through like a basic review of like what's on the back of the book. And this book is about Muriel McAuley, who lives in a Scottish town called Witch Haven. And there's like a big American corpo coming to knock down the town, and a fog rolls in. Ominous. And that's about what you get from the cover. It doesn't say too much about like what it's actually about. And you can skip to this timestamp right here if you want to get the final review and everything, but I'm going to go through some spoilery parts right now. Right now. So turn away. In essence, what this book is about is a monster. Oh, I can't say the F word. It's about a monster lover. Let me back up again. It's about a little old lady named Muriel, which is very interesting because there's a lot of books that don't start, or actually there's just a lot of media that doesn't showcase older people, and she's like upwards of like 80. I think she said she's 86 in the book. She's either 85 or 86. I can't remember exactly which one it is. I think it's 86. But really, she's just a feisty, um, old Scottish lady who is just trying to live in an old cottage that her and her husband made. For some reason, at the beginning of the book, you start with her picking up dead body parts on the beach for no explicable reason. But it's horror. I don't know if you can really reason with horror. But yeah, so she's picking up dead like body parts off the beach, and then she rolls over to her house, and the American corpo that's coming in is named Patrick Grant. And Patrick Grant has a lot of people. They don't really say what he is, like what he does, because it's not that long of a book. So they just kind of like explain in short terms that he's just a big scary corporate man. Basically, a rep comes over and is like, "You have to get out. You have to get out. I'm gonna," and they're like threatening her. Like they're threatening this little old lady, which is weird, but you know, this lady comes over with a bodyguard against Muriel, and Muriel's like a little old lady who's like, you know, the wind can knock her over. Actually, they said that in the book, the wind can knock her over. So it's like, I don't know why they're all bringing all this security and shit, especially in the beginning. I don't know. Muriel's like, I don't want to sell my house. So she kind of shoos her out. She pretends to threaten her with a gun. She doesn't have a gun. But she still pretends to threaten her with a gun. This kind of sets the stage for like the shenanigans that are unfolding, because everything seems to escalate at a very rapid pace for no reason at all other than to escalate as quickly as possible. She's worried that she's going to lose her house, and she knows that if she were to just, you know, go back to her son, she has a son, and he would just stick her in an old folks home. She doesn't want that. She wants to live in the house that she, you know, made very lovingly with her husband, her late husband, whose name is Billy. Billy is out of the picture, and he's been out of the picture for 10 years. And often characters will refer to her as Miss McAllie, and she will correct them because she always corrects them because she was married. Going forward, she goes to the town hall where they're like, "Oh, we're all trying to sell." Like, it's not all of them, but like at least half of the people there are already gone, and then a couple people in the town hall meeting have sold their house, and Muriel's like, "You can't do that because now we all don't have a united front and they're going to bully us out." And the people are like, "Well, let them bully us then because we don't have the resources to fight these people." And she's sad. But she does have a friend there named Arthur. We like Arthur. He's a badass old Scottish man, and he just very much just wants to stay in his home as well. So after the town hall meeting, Arthur like takes her home, and I don't know why, but there's like people already working on the street. I assume it's because half of the people just sold their house anyway. Arthur antagonizes them because that's what you do when you're a hard-headed old Scottish man. You just threaten them anyways, despite them being younger, faster, and stronger than you probably. He's in a tractor because I don't think he has a car. I think he just rides around on his tractor, and he just kind of goes through the construction zone because he's like, I have a tractor and it's technically a construction vehicle, so I can go through here. Goodbye. And then it's really interesting how he kind of treats everybody like there's no consequences to the way that that he speaks. There shouldn't be, but it's kind of interesting that he talks that way. Once Muriel gets home, like there's more construction people already working on knocking down her house, where their point where she's like they're knocking down her like chicken coops, and she's notably very upset about this. And that's when Arthur goes a little bit further and threatens them with a farming shotgun to get off of her land. And like all of her chickens basically exploded. And in this book, they do go through the gore pretty heavy-handedly. They are like, whoa, they exploded. There's blood everywhere. Oh my God. So that's one of the things that you really have to pay attention or be aware of if you're going to enjoy this book, because it's a lot of guts and blood everywhere because it's a horror book. Arthur helps her back into her house, and he's like, fight everybody for her. But it's like they both know that they're kind of screwed here. She just wants to get out of the house. So she gets out of the house and she walks around. She's trying to walk towards this little cave called Rory's Cave, which is the cave that her late husband actually proposed to her in. So she was like, this is very comforting. Hooray. She goes there. And then she has the very, very unfortunate experience of running into Connor Grant, which is Patrick Grant's son. And he's been overseeing the whole golf course creation because that's what they're trying to make Witch Haven into. They're trying to make it into a golf course. I could be wrong, but I think this is the first time they mention it, where they're like, this whole town is going to shit and all of this garbage is happening because of a golf course. Connor is snorting drugs off of a naked woman, and he's clearly out of his goddamn mind. And I'm going to put a passage right here with much censoring to how out of his mind he is. Oh God, why would he say that? Anyway, so yeah, and he's like advancing on Muriel at this point, obviously, since you read the passage there. And he basically is like, you're killing my buzz. So he like hits her, and of course, a grown man in his prime on a lot of drugs is gonna knock an old woman down pretty easily. And he does do that. He knocks her down very easily. And because Muriel is a badass old lady, She like picks up his cane or her cane and like smacks him one. And the badassery unfortunately does not save her from Connor Grant kicking the crap out of her, unfortunately. So he beats her up, like he beats her within an inch of her life. He basically is trying to beat her up enough to where she will die on the beach. And so he leaves. That's when, like, Muriel's laying on the beach, like, ow, it hurts, I'm dying. And she can hear a weird voice calling for help. Not her own, because she's calling for help too, but she starts hearing someone else calling for help. So she gets up and kind of wobbles over to this thing that she can hear calling for help. And the creature in question is the one on the cover of the book, which was actually, the art was done by Trevor Henderson, who created other horror pictures online. The one of the most famous ones being Siren Head. So she hobbles over to this mass and she tries to help it out. But when she touches it, it miraculously heals everything that was wrong with her. So she's not only not dying anymore, she feels better, like she's more spry, and she just forgets about her cane, and she runs off to get her, like, to get a wheelbarrow for this creature, and she brings it into her bathtub and dumps it in her bathtub. So she fusses over this blob for a while, and she tries her best to take care of it, and decides to name this monster Avalon after Frankie Avalon, who sings Beauty School Dropout from Grease.
Beauty School Dropout.
I didn't know who it was at first because I was like, okay, yeah, those are words, and I wasn't gonna look it up as I was reading, but after when I started writing the script, I looked that up and I was like, he's saying Beauty School Dropout from Grease. So I'm not sure why she chose that name, and I'm not sure if it was like the author thinking that's just what old ladies do, but it was kind of funny. Um, so she's taking care of Avalon, and it, for lack of a better term, love bites her on the elbow. And that's kind of where this all is gonna start, with the love biting. Now she's bleeding. She's bleeding into the water. She's like scolding the monster, and the monster's like, that doesn't really say anything. But as she's scolding it, Arthur shows up and she's like, oh crap. She has to deal with him too. I forgot to mention that before Avalon, like, love bites her, and before she gets like her stuffing beat out of her, she actually saw Arthur getting arrested on TV. So she's very surprised he's there. He's like, ah, whatever, it happens. They just wanted to scare me. It was just a media circus and whatever. And she's like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. She's like trying to like be as quick as possible because there's a floating goo ball in her tub and she's bleeding. So Arthur, of course, notices that she's bleeding, and he's like, hey, you want to get a band-aid on that? I can help you. And she's like, no, you're not doing that. You're not helping me. I'm gonna help myself. You get out. Go, go, go. Go home. And he's like, are you sure you don't need help? You're bleeding a lot. Even if it was like a tiny bite, I guess, because like her blood isn't coagulating correctly. It just keeps bleeding. She kind of like shoos him out, and she's like, get out. Go. Get out of here, Arthur. And um because she's like, I guess because Avalon like took her blood, it's now speaking in the voice of her late husband Billy, and she's kind of having a very heavy emotional response to it. So she's just sad. She just and she's just sad about Billy. And for there, it kind of skips to the next chapter where it's like Arthur is thinking about various things like how he's deeply in love with Muriel and always has been despite him being married previously, and he didn't want to say anything because she married his best friend, and he's just kind of like sitting there like thinking about the life he wasted without Muriel being married to him. And he starts hearing voices outside of his his cottage. And he's looking around and he sees gasoline start pouring into his house, and a bunch of rowdy hooligans. I don't want to call them children because they're at least in their 20s. So a bunch of rowdy hooligans start breaking in and asking for money. And like he's got like a tin can full of money, and he's like, here's some money, go away. And they're like, haha, that's not what we're here for. We're here to kill you. And he's like, okay. And he starts panicking. Of course he's panicking, and he grabs a knife and like fatally stabs one of them before he's killed. Um I I do like Arthur a lot. I think he's a great character, and honestly, I really wish we could see more of him. But because it's like I would almost call it a novella length book, it's you don't really get to see a lot of him. And I'm glad that the book didn't overstay its welcome, and you'll see why later. But because it's a horror novel, I'm not shocked. And then this this part is really where all of the murdering starts ramping up, because it's like there's like a point in this book where everything just starts going downhill very quickly. And it's around here where Arthur gets killed. And Muriel is now looking out her window and she's like, Arthur's cottage is on fire. So she darts out of the house. She's trying to go save him, but it takes about an hour for the fire rescue to come in. It doesn't really work. So the house gets burned down and Muriel's really upset. But okay, so the book does this thing where it'll hop around to who's important and what's happening to certain people at certain times. And this is when it starts hopping to someone named Tommy Bowden. And you kind of go into it not really understanding who Bowden is at the time, but it does let you know pretty quickly that he's the guy that got stabbed by Arthur. And his friends basically left him for dead in the grass. And he's like, those bastards left me for dead in the grass. No. And then he's like bleeding out, and he tries to call out to Muriel, but she's not paying attention to anything but her friend's, house being burnt down for good reason. He just kind of stumbles his way into Muriel's cottage, holding his like organs inside of him, and looking around, using her tea towels and stuff because she didn't lock the door. She ran out to try to save Arthur. And he could hear something coming out of the bathtub. And here comes Avalon to kill him with brutal force. So they use extreme graphic violence when they do show people dying in this book. I think that it really isn't for the faint of heart. It goes in and so it shows like Tommy crapping himself before he dies. So there's a lot of stuff that people really can't, you know, handle, and it's written in a very much like a cinematic way where like if you tried to translate it into a movie, it would be a great movie. It felt like a very much like a horror movie in my head, but like a horror movie that Damien Leone would have directed. So after this, Muriel is talking to the cops, who are clearly paid off. This American corpo gets to do whatever he wants because he has so much money, and she's like, "Well, I'm gonna go home," and she goes home because she can't even report Arthur's death or what she believes is a murder, which is true but nobody listens, nobody cares, which sucks. I really like Muriel. I think that she deserved better than to just suffer, but yeah, she just suffers. Um, she goes home and her house is covered in blood because Avalon does is a very messy eater. He just eats and it explodes everywhere. And the thing that is the most alarming to her is now there is a naked man in her chair, in Billy's chair, who is just naked Billy. Yeah. This book suddenly turns into some sort of Shape of Water situation where that really tells you what the plot is for the rest of the book. I started calling Avalon a he because the instant that he turns into Billy, it's like he lets her know that he is whatever an equivalent to a male is in horrifying blob form. It's male, I suppose. I guess he's not the only thing because there is like a female blob thingy that he's seen once and then never saw again, apparently. So, they have that kind of chat. And Muriel does not have any clothes for Avalon except for Billy's old suit, which was like the wedding suit, the suit that he wore to everything. It was just his everything suit. So she gives him that to wear, and they go on to, have a heart to heart. He's lonely and she's traumatized because Billy passed away by, going into his boat into the ocean, and he's gone. And she never really got closure on it. So, yeah. Because Avalon can't keep the form very long, she turns into a blob again. And because she's traumatized by the death of her husband, she like starts reliving all the trauma again because it's like a lot of the loss and grief just comes flooding back to her, and she's just sad. It We go into, Arthur's funeral, and um Arthur's son is already like trying to figure out what they're going to do with an inheritance that they probably aren't going to get. And then Muriel thinks about the ramification of killing people Dexter style, where they know, they're bad people, but and she's like, when is Avalon gonna be Billy again? It's that kind of thing. And like once again, all of the stuff starts ramping up again. So when Muriel gets home from the funeral, basically what happens is some big old mercenary guys try to force her to unalive herself, which is one of those things that makes me go, why are they bringing a bunch of mercenaries for this little old lady who probably has no one checking on her? Like, they bring a rope for her to unalive herself with that instead. And it's like, she doesn't have rafters. And it's like, why are we doing that? And it's a lot of that. That's why it doesn't get a perfect score from me. You'll see my score later. But it's a lot of this. It's over the top kind of trying to deal with a singular old woman. They're not aware that there's a big monster there yet. There's no there's no awareness of that. So I don't know why they're bringing in these big old mercenaries for, you know, no purpose. Yeah, they make Muriel bleed over the bathtub, which looks like self-inflicted. Self-inflicted. You can read the book if you want to know more, but this is one of those things that's like a big trigger warning because it's kind of a lot. And by kind of a lot, it's a lot. Avalon, unalives the men. They, whatever. They're gone now because he eats them. Crunch. It's actually not crunch. I think it's more like a acid type of situation. He just kind of absorbs them messily. And I'm trying to figure out a lot of YouTube safe words to explain all of this, but it's hard because it's so violent and so graphic. Now that he's eaten a few people, he like does this weird that him and Muriel go to the cave and suddenly there's like this weird spicy scene in there. It's not very long, but I'm like, why is there a spicy scene in my horror book? But okay. And it wasn't super spicy. It was out of nowhere. If in my opinion it was out of nowhere and it made me go, huh? This is the point where I really cannot describe the rest of the book other than a bunch of crazy shit happens and then Patrick Grant shows up with like the news and the insane asylum and like I was like, what is happening? So this is where it kind of lost me, and I'm not even gonna really detail this part out because it's kind of comical and kind of too much to the point where I'm like, just read it. It's 200 pages. I think it's written really well, but it's just so stupid at the end. So, yeah, they basically, Patrick Grant shows up. They take him hostage, Muriel and Avalon, and she becomes a sea monster with Avalon. And that's how it ends. Hooray! They don't explain how that happens. It just does. Anyways, this is where this timestamp would have been. Yeah. And that's the book. Rating this book, I would give it a 4-star. The ending was very crazy. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I did. But if you're thematically, if you're a fan of Terrifier and Shape of Water, which is a crazy sentiment, you'd probably love this book. It's a horror book with monster romance in it, and it's like mostly in theming and concepts. It's not exactly the same. You're not going to see art or, the amphibian man, but it's like a general vibe that it would be like Terrifier and Shape of Water, in my opinion. And that's my review of this book. It was good, even if the ending was crazy, to the point where I don't even know that I could describe it correctly. So just be aware. They look up trigger warnings. They're kind of spoilery. They can be, but it's horror, so you should probably expect a lot of horrible things to happen. And yeah, thank you for coming to my book review. Please like, comment, and subscribe as the YouTube algorithm foresees. And you guys can come see me on Twitch at twitch.tv/serialeatervt if you want to see me live. And also that's where I stream on weeknights. I've switched my schedule around. So most weeknights I'd be streaming on my Twitch channel. Yeah. Anyway, water your eyeball puddles. You'll never know when it's going to be your next boyfriend.